Control does not always arrive with shackles, nor does it always roar with authority. More often, it enters quietly, in whispers, wrapped in softness, cloaked in gestures that look like kindness. You are not seized by force. You are invited, persuaded, slowly eased into comfort until you cannot tell where care ends and control begins. This is the paradox of the gentle chain. It never looks like a chain at all. It looks like someone who worries for you, someone who takes burdens from your shoulders, someone who tells you that they know the way when you feel lost. Their voice reassures you. Their presence calms you. And in the beginning, you welcome it. You mistake their hand for safety, their words for wisdom, their concern for love. But beneath this surface, a transaction is taking place. Each gesture of care is not a gift. It is a seed of ownership. Each time you allow someone to decide in your place, each time you let them carry a weight for you, each time you trust them to know better than you are slowly signing away fragments of your autonomy. The trap is subtle, almost invisible, because it feels like relief. It feels like rest. It feels like being cared for. But relief has a cost, and the cost is freedom. The person who takes away your struggle also takes away your strength. The one who shields you from pain also shields you from growth. The one who insists on protecting you from mistakes also strips you of learning, of risk, of becoming. And so the chains are forged not with iron, but with tenderness. They weigh nothing at first. They even feel like comfort around your wrists. But the longer they stay, the tighter they pull, until the idea of walking without them feels terrifying. And that is the brilliance of gentle control. It convinces you that the prison is protection, that the chains are love. It begins innocently enough. Perhaps it is the parent who never lets their child climb too high, out of fear of a fall. Perhaps it is the partner who insists on making every decision, claiming they only want what is best. Perhaps it is the friend who always reminds you of the dangers of stepping outside your comfort zone. On the surface, these acts feel protective, even noble. You tell yourself they care. You tell yourself they are selfless. You tell yourself that you are lucky to have someone who looks out for you. But slowly, without noticing, your muscles of independence weaken. You stop making choices because they are always made for you. You stop taking risks because they are always discouraged. You stop trusting your own instincts because someone else's voice always drowns them out. You convince yourself that you are being cared for, when in reality, you are being domesticated, like a bird whose wings are gently clipped for its own safety. You begin to believe that the sky is too dangerous, that flying is not worth the fall. And this is how the gentle chains tighten, by teaching you to fear freedom and to love captivity. At first, you resist, but resistance is framed as foolishness. At first, you question, but questions are dismissed as ingratitude. And soon, you silence yourself, because to doubt them feels like betrayal. This silence is the point of no return. For once you stop listening to your own voice, the only voice left is theirs, guiding you, shaping you, controlling you. Not with threats, not with violence, but with care. That is the genius of it. Control disguised as care is stronger than any cage built with iron, because you guard it yourself. You hold the bars in place. You defend them. You even thank them. The cruelest part of the gentle chain is how it rewires your perception of love. You begin to equate care with authority, protection with obedience, concern with ownership. You start to believe that to be loved is to be managed, to be sheltered, to be directed. And in doing so, you lose the ability to recognize freedom as love. Freedom begins to feel like abandonment. Independence begins to feel like neglect. The hand that releases you begins to feel like it is pushing you away. And so you cling even tighter to the one who holds you in chains, because they are the only one who makes you feel safe. This is how control perpetuates itself, not through cruelty, but through dependence. The more you are sheltered, the more fragile you become. The more fragile you become, the more you need shelter. And the more you need shelter, the more power you surrender. This cycle is not broken easily, because the chains are invisible. There is no moment when you can point and say, "Here is where I was captured." There is no event dramatic enough to awaken you, no wound severe enough to expose the trap. Instead, you live slowly, quietly, inside a shrinking circle, thinking it is love. Until one day, you realize that you no longer know how to make a choice without permission. You no longer know how to stand without support. You no longer know who you are without someone else to tell you. This is the death that comes from gentle control, the death of autonomy, disguised as care. It is a death without blood, without violence, without scars. It is the slow suffocation of the self, until all that remains is obedience. And the most haunting part is this: you asked for it. You welcomed it. You thanked them for it. And that is why gentle chains are the hardest to break, because to break them feels like rejecting care, like betraying love. But if you do not break them, you will never truly live. Control rarely shows its true face. If it did, most people would resist it. No one willingly surrenders to chains when they appear as chains. No one kneels to authority when it looks like tyranny. That is why the most effective control is always disguised. And the disguise it most often chooses is benevolence. The mask of kindness is the oldest and most effective camouflage for domination, because it disarms without raising suspicion. A command disguised as advice feels harmless. A restriction disguised as protection feels necessary. A manipulation disguised as love feels comforting. The words sound sweet, the tone feels warm, and yet beneath it all, the purpose remains the same: to bend your will to theirs. You do not question the mask, because questioning kindness feels cruel, ungrateful, or paranoid. And so you accept what is offered, not realizing that what is being given to you is not a gift, but a leash. When someone claims to know what is best for you, when someone insists on guiding your path for your own good, the power you surrender is not obvious at first. It feels like cooperation, like trust, like intimacy. But slowly, beneath the weight of their guidance, your own voice begins to fade. This is the brilliance of benevolence as a weapon. It does not crush the victim. It convinces the victim to surrender willingly. The tyrant who wears cruelty on his face can be fought. The tyrant who wears kindness on his face is invited in, protected, and even loved. This is why entire systems of power, entire empires, entire relationships are built on the mask of benevolence. Because what is protected by love is harder to escape than what is enforced by fear. The mask of benevolence works not only because it hides domination, but because it rewrites the meaning of loyalty. When someone appears endlessly selfless, when their every gesture is framed as care, you begin to feel indebted to them. Their authority no longer feels like imposition. It feels like something you owe them. Each sacrifice they claim to make on your behalf becomes a debt you must repay through obedience. Each decision they make for you becomes proof of their wisdom, evidence that you are safer in their hands than in your own. And so you begin to doubt yourself, not because you lack ability, but because the mask of benevolence has trained you to see your independence as recklessness, your will as arrogance, your doubts as betrayal. The moment you think of pulling away, You hear the echo of their voice reminding you of everything they've done, everything they've given, everything they've protected you from. And guilt silences rebellion more effectively than fear ever could. In fear, at least, you know you are imprisoned. But under the mask of benevolence, you call your prison love. You tell yourself you are grateful. You tell yourself you are blessed. You tell yourself you are cared for. And in that self-deception, the mask does its most dangerous work. It convinces you that your silence is not submission, but gratitude. You defend the very person who diminishes you, because to criticize them would feel monstrous. They are not controlling you. You insist. They are helping you. But help that robs you of autonomy is not help at all. It is ownership, draped in the soft colors of compassion. And the longer you accept it, the harder it becomes to recognize where their voice ends and yours begins. The most frightening thing about the mask of benevolence is not what it does to you, but what it does through you. Once you internalize it, you begin to repeat it. You wear the same mask in your own relationships, with your children, with your friends, with anyone you feel responsible for. You tell yourself you are only protecting them, only guiding them, only helping them avoid the mistakes you once made. But in truth, you are passing down the same chains that bind you, cloaked in the same disguise that once deceived you. This is how control multiplies across generations, how entire cultures are built on the illusion of care. Parents clip their children's wings and call it protection. Partners demand obedience and call it love. Leaders strip freedom and call it safety. And in every case, the mask hides the reality. Freedom is being eroded. Choice is being replaced. Autonomy is being killed slowly and quietly. The mask of benevolence is not just an individual tactic. It is a cultural one, a collective one, a universal one. It is the way entire populations are convinced to obey, the way entire societies are lulled into submission. Because when chains are hidden behind kindness, rebellion looks ungrateful, and gratitude looks like loyalty. This is why people remain in toxic relationships, why citizens accept corrupt leaders, why families suffocate each other in the name of love. The mask of benevolence makes captivity look righteous and independence look cruel. And so the question becomes, how do you tear off a mask that has convinced the world it is a face of love? The answer is not simple, because removing the mask does not only expose the oppressor, it exposes you. It forces you to admit that what you called love was control, that what you called care was possession, that what you defended was the very thing that weakened you. And most people are too afraid to face that truth. So they keep the mask in place. They smile at it. They thank it. And they die beneath it. Chains are not always forged from metal. Some are built from comfort, from favors, from help that feels too sweet to refuse. At first, it seems harmless. Someone stepping in when you stumble. Someone carrying what feels too heavy. Someone deciding for you when the choice feels overwhelming. In those moments, you tell yourself this is care, this is love, this is protection. But what you fail to see is how quickly reliance turns into captivity. The more you accept, the less you attempt. The less you attempt, the weaker you become. Soon, you no longer stumble, because you have forgotten how to walk. You no longer carry weight, because you have forgotten how to lift. You no longer decide, because you have forgotten how to trust yourself. And in that forgetting, a cage is quietly built around you, one you do not resist, because it was made of gifts you accepted willingly. Dependency does not announce itself. It does not crash into your life like a storm. It creeps in like a gentle hand on your shoulder, convincing you that you no longer have to fight, no longer have to try, no longer have to be alone. And who would reject that? Who would refuse such comfort? But the moment you lean on it fully, you discover the truth. Your legs no longer remember how to stand. Dependency is the cage that convinces you it is shelter. You do not see the bars until you reach for freedom and realize your strength has withered away. And by then, the person who offered help is no longer just a helper. They are the master of your survival. You belong to them, because without them, you collapse. The trap of dependency is that it rewires your sense of identity. You begin to define yourself not by what you can do, but by what is done for you. When choices are made on your behalf, you start to believe that you cannot choose wisely. When struggles are carried for you, you begin to assume you cannot endure. When someone tells you they know better, and you let them prove it again and again, you accept that their judgment is superior to your own. And slowly, almost invisibly, your autonomy drains away. You don't notice it at first, because you are distracted by the relief from pressure, from mistakes, from fear of failure. But relief is a dangerous drug. The more you taste it, the more unbearable effort becomes. You begin to crave dependence, even when you are capable, even when you know you should act. The mind becomes addicted to being carried, and the heart becomes afraid of standing on its own. This is how captivity takes root. Not through force, not through violence, but through your own willingness to hand over your will. You convince yourself it is easier this way. You convince yourself it is safer. You even convince yourself that it is better for you. And soon, the one who provides becomes the one you cannot live without. They own not only your circumstances, but your self-image. You see yourself through their eyes. You measure your worth through their approval. You feel your existence tied to their presence. This is not care. It is consumption disguised as protection. For the more you depend, the less you remain yourself. What you call love is slowly erasing you. What you call safety is quietly strangling you. And the saddest part is this. You defend the very hands that built the cage, because without them, you fear you will not survive. Dependency is the most subtle form of control because it turns freedom into a threat. Once you are dependent, independence feels like danger. You tell yourself you cannot make it on your own. You cannot endure alone. You cannot choose without guidance. And in doing so, you chain yourself to the very person who holds power over you. They do not need to command you anymore. You command yourself to obey. They do not need to lock the door. You keep yourself inside. This is the perfection of captivity disguised as care. It requires no enforcement, no reminders, no punishments. You carry the bars with you, convinced they are protection. You silence your own rebellion, convinced it is foolishness. You even feel grateful, convinced your cage is mercy. And so, the cycle deepens. The one who provides becomes irreplaceable, and you stop imagining a life without them. You fear not only their absence, but your own weakness in their absence. And in that fear, you surrender the last piece of autonomy you had left, the will to imagine freedom. That is the final stage of dependency. It is no longer about what they give you or what they protect you from. It is about what you cannot remember how to do without them. They have become the air you breathe, the ground you walk on, the compass you follow. And to lose them feels like death. But here lies the truth you must face. If you cannot live without someone, you are not being loved. You are being owned. And ownership dressed as affection is not love at all. It is the most insidious form of control, a prison that feels like home, a cage that feels like care. Guilt is one of the most powerful tools of control because it requires no chains, no force, no threats. It lives inside you, shaping your choices long after the words that planted it have been spoken. It whispers in your mind, reminding you of everything done for you, every sacrifice made, every act of so-called love that you are told you must honor. And in honoring it, you bow. The guilt trap works because it ties obedience not to fear, but to morality. You do not obey because you are afraid. You obey because you believe it would be wrong not to. When someone tells you, "After everything I've done for you," or "How could you do this to me?" they are not reminding you of love. They are binding you with invisible ropes. You carry their sacrifices like weights, their kindness like debts, their care like chains. And you call it loyalty, you call it gratitude, you even call it love. But what it really is a transaction. They gave so they could take. They sacrificed so they could own. They cared so they could claim. The guilt trap ensures you will never question, never rebel, never step out of line. Not because you cannot, but because you believe you must not. To disobey feels like cruelty. To resist feels like betrayal. To walk away feels like murder. And so you stay, not because you want to, but because guilt convinces you that leaving would make you a monster. In truth, guilt is the cage keeper that never touches you, yet keeps you locked in place. You are not restrained by their hand. You are restrained by your own conscience, manipulated into serving someone else's power. The genius of guilt as a weapon is that it turns your own virtues against you. Your compassion, your empathy, your loyalty, all of these become weaknesses to be exploited. The more you care, the easier you are to control. The more you value relationships, the more you can be trapped. The more you want to be good, the more you can be made to feel bad. Guilt transforms your strength into submission. It convinces you that independence is selfish, that disagreement is cruelty, that choosing your own path is an insult to those who loved you. And slowly, you stop making decisions for yourself, not because you are incapable, but because you fear the emotional punishment that follows. Every step you take outside their expectations feels like a crime. Every word you speak against their will feels like betrayal. And so you censor yourself, police yourself, punish yourself. You become your own jailer, carrying their voice in your head as if it were your conscience, when in truth it is nothing but manipulation disguised as morality. This is the essence of the guilt trap. It makes rebellion feel like sin and obedience feel like redemption. You begin to crave their approval, not because you truly value it, but because you cannot bear the crushing weight of guilt when it is withdrawn. They smile, and you breathe. They frown, and you collapse. Their disappointment feels like a wound, their anger like a curse, their sorrow like a storm that drowns you in shame. And so you do what they ask, again and again, not because it is right, but because guilt has convinced you that it is wrong not to. In this way, guilt binds more tightly than fear, because fear can be conquered with courage. Guilt, however, convinces you that courage itself is cruelty, and that submission is the only way to remain a good person. The tragedy of the guilt trap is that it poisons the very meaning of love. What should be free becomes transactional. What should be mutual becomes one-sided. What should liberate you becomes the very thing that imprisons you. You begin to believe that love requires sacrifice without end, that care requires obedience without question, that gratitude requires servitude without escape. And in this belief, you lose yourself. You no longer live for your own desires, your own dreams, your own voice. You live to avoid the crushing silence of their disappointment, the heavy weight of their guilt. You stay in relationships long past their breaking point. You obey leaders who no longer deserve respect. You let family members suffocate you in the name of devotion. And you call it love, when it is nothing more than fear dressed as duty. The guilt trap does not simply hold you, it erodes you. It strips away your sense of self until all that remains is obligation. You are no longer a person with a will. You are an offering, a servant, a hostage to someone else's narrative of sacrifice. And the cruelest part is this: you defend it. You tell yourself you are good because you endure. You tell yourself you are loyal because you remain. You tell yourself you are loving because you obey. But deep down, a quiet truth gnaws at you. The truth that this is not love, but ownership. That the chains of guilt were not placed on you to protect you, but to bind you. And that unless you face this truth, you will spend your life confusing submission with virtue and slavery with care. To escape the guilt trap is to commit what feels like the ultimate crime, to put your own freedom above someone else's comfort. But if you cannot bring yourself to do it, then you will never truly be free. For guilt, once planted, grows into a cage without walls, one you carry wherever you go, one that convinces you you are not worthy of life outside its bars. There is no prison more convincing than the one built with the vocabulary of safety. The language of protection has always been one of the most subtle forms of dominance because it hides its claws behind the promise of shelter. Few recognize it for what it is, because it does not sound like a command. It sounds like concern. I'm only looking out for you. I just want what's best for you. You'll thank me later. These words do not strike like threats. They soothe like lullabies, yet they carry a weight heavier than chains. They implant the idea that your own judgment is unreliable, your own choices dangerous, your own instincts untrustworthy. Once that belief takes root, you no longer fight against the rules placed upon you, because you begin to believe those rules are saving you from yourself. The brilliance of this disguise is that protection cannot be easily resisted. After all, who dares argue against safety? To rebel against protective language makes you appear reckless, ungrateful, foolish. And so you learn to nod, to accept, to allow your boundaries to be redrawn again and again in the name of care. You are told that freedom is hazardous, that independence is reckless, that self-reliance is arrogance. You do not feel oppressed, you feel sheltered. And in that illusion lies the trap, for protection that limits your choices is not protection at all, but possession. The voice that claims to safeguard you has no interest in your growth. It has interest in your compliance. What is framed as guidance is in truth surveillance. What is presented as care is in truth control. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to mistake captivity for comfort, submission for safety, and silence for peace. The language of protection thrives because it appeals to your deepest fears: fear of failure, fear of danger, fear of loneliness. Those who use this language do not need to shout or force. They need only whisper that the world is too harsh for you, that the risks are too great, that you are too fragile to walk unguarded. Each reminder, each caution, each gentle warning carves away your confidence and replaces it with dependence. Soon, you begin to hear their voice even when they are absent, a constant reminder of all the dangers they warned you about. You hesitate to step forward, to try, to experiment, because their language has already branded the unknown as catastrophic. You think you are being cautious, when in truth you are being conditioned. And while protection feels warm, it is warmth with a cost: the erosion of your own decision-making power. What is worse, the language of protection does not present itself as a cage. It presents itself as love. Those who use it are not tyrants in your eyes. They are saviors. And because of this, you defend them even to yourself. You excuse their limitations, you rationalize their restrictions, you silence your own questions. They only want what's best for me. This phrase becomes the anthem of your captivity. But consider this. What kind of protection keeps you from growing stronger? What kind of care convinces you that your wings are too weak to fly? Genuine protection does not lock you away. It prepares you for storms. Anything else is not protection, but possession. The tragedy is that you may never see it clearly, because the language of protection has been woven so deeply into your conscience that to reject it feels like betraying not just the speaker, but the very idea of love itself. The most insidious part of the language of protection is that it rewrites your identity. It does not simply limit what you do. It alters what you believe you are capable of. Over time, you begin to internalize the warnings, the rules, the limits, until they no longer sound like someone else's voice. They sound like your own. You convince yourself that you are weak, that you are unsafe, that you need guarding. You begin to self-censor, to self-limit, to self-restrain, all while believing you are making wise choices. This is the ultimate triumph of the language of protection. It does not need constant enforcement, because it teaches you to enforce it on yourself. You become the jailer of your own freedom, convinced that every locked door is for your benefit, every denied opportunity a blessing, every lost chance a shield against disaster. And yet, beneath the surface, a quiet hunger grows. A hunger for risk, for choice, for ownership of your own destiny. But the moment this hunger rises, guilt and fear collide to silence it. You are reminded, by them, or by the echo of their words in your own mind, that choosing freedom is reckless, that walking away is betrayal, that desiring independence is selfish. And so you stay, bound not by chains but by words. The language of protection has transformed care into a weapon, love into a leash, safety into a prison. To break free from it requires not rebellion against violence, but rebellion against comfort. It requires the courage to admit that sometimes the warmest embrace is the one that suffocates, and that the voice that says, "I'm only protecting you," may in truth be the one that fears your strength the most. For once you see through this language, you recognize its true purpose, not to shield you from danger, but to shield them from losing control. Autonomy does not collapse in a single moment. It does not vanish with an act of violence or disappear in the glare of tyranny. Instead, it erodes gradually, in the name of kindness, under the shadow of concern. The slow death of autonomy begins with small concessions, the kind you hardly notice. Someone steps in to help you with a choice, then later insists on making it for you because you always struggle with decisions. At first, you are grateful, relieved even, because the weight of responsibility feels lighter when someone else carries it. But soon the pattern repeats, spreads, expands, until one day you realize that every meaningful decision has already been made for you. What you eat, where you go, who you see, how you spend your time, each determined by a voice that insists it is only protecting you. And because this voice never shouts, never threatens, never commands with violence, you struggle to resist. After all, how can you rebel against what appears to be care? Yet that is how autonomy dies, not with a scream, but with a whisper, not with chains, but with comfort. The insidious brilliance lies in how easily you participate in your own surrender. Because each moment of relinquished control feels small, insignificant, forgivable, You do not see that these moments accumulate like drops of poison. Slowly, quietly, they drain you of the ability to trust yourself until independence feels unnatural, even dangerous. In the end, autonomy does not die because it was stolen. It dies because it was traded, piece by piece, for the illusion of safety. The slow death of autonomy thrives on repetition, on the subtle reshaping of your identity until you are no longer certain of who you were before the cage was built. Once someone convinces you that they know better, their guidance begins to overwrite your inner voice. At first, you hear a conflict, the urge to decide for yourself clashing with their constant corrections. But over time, the conflict fades. You begin to anticipate their rules before they speak them, to censor your desires before they are exposed, to regulate yourself in accordance with their preferences. This is the final victory of disguised control. It does not need to dominate you with force because it teaches you to dominate yourself. The person who cares for you becomes the architect of your boundaries, but you become the one who enforces them. And because you believe this arrangement shields you from mistakes, you cling to it, defend it, even excuse it when others raise questions. You tell yourself that their watchfulness is love, that their intervention is protection, that their constant involvement proves devotion. But devotion is not the same as respect. Real care allows you to stumble, to fail, to recover. The false version smothers you in guidance until you forget the taste of freedom. And what dies along with autonomy is not only your right to choose, but also your capacity to grow. For without decisions, there can be no wisdom. Without risk, no strength. Without freedom, no true identity. The tragedy is that by the time you realize what has been lost, you have already been conditioned to fear the very independence you crave. You stand before an open door, but you hesitate to step through because you no longer believe you can survive on your own. The final stage of autonomy's death is resignation. You begin to confuse the absence of struggle with the presence of peace. You accept the idea that control disguised as concern is a natural part of life, that someone must always know better than you, that surrender is easier than resistance. You tell yourself this arrangement is stability, but deep inside you sense the truth. It is stagnation. You have been convinced that being cared for is the highest form of love, but in reality, it has robbed you of the chance to become yourself. The most tragic element is that those who orchestrate this slow erosion often believe their own lies. They tell themselves they are guiding you, helping you, protecting you, when in truth they are protecting their own fear of losing relevance, their own need to feel indispensable. And so the cycle continues. Care as control, protection as possession, concern as confinement. The more you accept it, the more invisible it becomes, until you no longer see the bars of your cage. But autonomy, even when buried, does not vanish entirely. A part of you still remembers freedom, still aches for the taste of unmediated choice. That part is dangerous, not to you, but to those who hold you. Because once you awaken to the truth, once you see that what has been offered as love was in fact a leash, the illusion collapses. The cost of reclaiming autonomy will be high, for breaking free means breaking the comfort that has kept you docile. It means enduring fear, loneliness, uncertainty. But it also means reclaiming the self that has been slowly suffocated under the weight of disguised care. And that reclamation, though painful, is the only resurrection autonomy will ever know. The most deceptive form of captivity is not the one enforced with threats, violence, or overt domination, but the one that cloaks itself in tenderness. The gentle grip does not bruise your skin or drag you into chains. It holds you softly, kindly, like a hand guiding you across uncertain terrain. And because it feels like care, you resist the urge to see it for what it is. That is how it endures, not by force, but by convincing you that you would be foolish to let go. It whispers that you are fragile, that you are safer in the grasp of another, that to step out alone is reckless. The tragedy of this grip lies not in its strength, but in its subtlety, for it is not designed to hold you forever. It is designed to teach you to hold yourself back. Once you have internalized its rhythm, you no longer need the guiding hand, because you begin to regulate your own movements in anticipation of its pressure. You tell yourself you are being careful, wise, patient, when in reality, you have been conditioned to equate hesitation with survival. The gentle grip has succeeded when you can no longer tell the difference between protection and possession, between safety and submission, between love and limitation. To break it, then, is not simply to rebel against an external force. It is to unlearn the comfort of being contained. And this is the reason it is so difficult. Breaking chains forged in cruelty gives you a sense of righteousness, but breaking chains woven from tenderness feels like betrayal. You are forced to choose between loyalty and liberty, between gratitude and growth, between being cared for and being free. That is why most never break the gentle grip. They convince themselves it is better to remain held, to remain safe, to remain small, rather than face the terror of unguarded existence. Yet every gentle grip has a weakness. It depends on your belief in its necessity. It cannot stand on its own. It must convince you that without it, you are lost. And so it feeds you carefully crafted narratives, stories of people who strayed from protection and were destroyed, warnings about the dangers that lurk outside, reminders of your own past mistakes magnified into proof that you cannot be trusted. These narratives become the walls of your cage, and over time, you defend them as though they were your own ideas. But something deeper always lingers, an unrest, a quiet rebellion that whispers whenever you see glimpses of others who live unbound. You notice the courage of those who choose for themselves, who stumble and rise without supervision, who walk through storms and emerge scarred but alive. A part of you envies them, even as another part reminds you to be grateful for the grip that shields you. This inner conflict is where the first cracks form. The realization that the gentle grip does not prevent pain, but prevents growth. That it does not guard you from failure, but from strength. That it does not keep you alive, but keeps you small. Once these thoughts begin to root, the language of protection that once sounded comforting begins to sound suffocating. The hands that once felt warm begin to feel heavy. The concern that once reassured begins to feel like control. And in that shift of perception lies the beginning of freedom. Because the grip is only as strong as your willingness to believe in it. The moment you begin to question, to doubt, to crave something beyond the cage of concern, the power of the grip falters. To break it, you must do the one thing it has trained you to fear most. Act on your own authority, even if it means stumbling, even if it means bleeding, even if it means being called ungrateful. Freedom, after all, is never granted, it is claimed. Breaking the gentle grip is not a single act of defiance, but a series of choices, small, deliberate, terrifying. It is saying no to guidance disguised as love. It is making decisions without seeking permission. It is refusing to be shamed for wanting independence. Each act feels dangerous because you have been conditioned to equate disobedience with destruction, but with every step you take, the illusion weakens. You begin to see that the disasters you were warned of do not always come, and when they do, you survive them. You discover that mistakes are not proof of your weakness, but the foundation of your strength. You learn that protection which denies you the right to fail is not protection at all. It is domination. And slowly, the world that once felt hostile begins to feel vast. The silence that once felt empty begins to feel free. The solitude that once felt like abandonment begins to feel like sovereignty. But freedom does not come without cost. You lose the comfort of being sheltered, the reassurance of being guided, the warmth of being watched over. You may be called selfish, reckless, even cruel for rejecting the hands that held you. Yet in time, you realize the truth. The gentle grip was never about your survival. It was about their control. By breaking it, you do not destroy love, you purify it. For real love does not grip, it releases. Real care does not command, it empowers. And real safety is not found in someone else's grasp, but in your ability to stand unguarded in a dangerous world. To break the gentle grip, then, is not merely to free yourself from another's control. It is to reclaim yourself from the illusion that care and captivity are the same. And once you have tasted that freedom, you will never mistake a cage for shelter again.